You ever have one of those moments where life flips from calm to chaos in just a blink? You think you're living steady, doing right by your family, your land, and your neighbors. Then, suddenly someone decides they own more of your life than you do. That's exactly what happened the day I found a shiny new metal fence stretching across the dusty dirt road that had been my ranch's lifeline for decades. But let me back up a little, because the story doesn't start with the fence. It starts with me, my family, and a piece of land that wasn't just dirt and grass, but our history, our sweat, our home. I'd grown up on that ranch, tucked away at the edge of a sprawling countryside. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't shiny. It was rough, sun-scorched, and muddy when it rained. But it was mine, or at least, it was supposed to be. My dad used to tell me, "Son, land is the one thing they're not making more of. Protect it, respect it, live with it." That stuck with me. So when he passed, I took on the ranch with all the grit and stubbornness he left me. Our access road was nothing special. Just a winding stretch of dirt and gravel connecting the highway to our ranch gates. It wasn't on anyone else's land. It had been carved generations ago, back when boundaries were drawn with handshakes and neighborly trust. Every morning before sunrise, I'd rumble down that road in my old pickup, sometimes with the windows down to catch the smell of fresh hay, sometimes with my boy riding shotgun, asking me questions about everything under the sun. That road was part of our daily rhythm, like the kitchen table or the old rocking chair on the porch. But then the HOA came along. Now, to be clear, I never signed up for a homeowners association. Ranchers like me, we don't usually mix well with them. HOAs are about manicured lawns and regulations about mailbox colors. Ranch life is about dust, sweat, and fixing fences with whatever wire you've got lying around. But over the years, as city folks spread out, a fancy development sprouted up just a few miles down. Those shiny new houses brought rules, meetings, and a board of people who thought they had a say in everything within sniffing distance of their property. And guess what? That old dirt road, the one my granddad had cleared with a mule and a cart, cut across the very edge of their development. At first, nobody said a word. I waved at their residents when I passed by, kept the road graded myself, and made sure I wasn't kicking up dust when their kids were out on their bikes. But then came the letters, polite at first. "We ask that you limit usage to certain hours." Then firmer. "You are trespassing on HOA property." And finally threatening, "Legal action will be taken." I ignored most of it, thinking surely common sense would prevail. It had always been my access road. Always. But common sense doesn't carry much weight when people see dollar signs or control. That morning when I found the fence stretched across the road, my chest went hollow. It wasn't just a chain strung between posts. It was a heavy-duty steel fence, padlocked, with a shiny sign bolted right on, "Private property, access restricted." My truck idled in front of it, the engine rattling like it could feel my temper. I stared at that fence, my hands gripping the steering wheel, so tight my knuckles turned white. My boy in the passenger seat looked at me with wide eyes. "Daddy, how we gonna get home?" I swallowed hard, because in that moment, I didn't have an answer. And I hated that. What followed was weeks of frustration. I tried calling the HOA office, only to be put on hold, shuffled around, and eventually hung up on. I showed up at their monthly meeting, boots dusty, hat in hand, and asked for a chance to speak. They let me, but the way they looked at me, it was like I was an intruder, some kind of nuisance. One man in a crisp polo shirt stood up and said, "Sir, your land use is outdated. We're trying to protect property values. That road doesn't belong to you anymore. You need to find another way to access your ranch." Another lady chimed in, "We can't have large trucks rattling through. It disturbs the peace of our community." I clenched my jaw and asked, "Where exactly do you suggest I build another road? Through a riverbed? Up a cliff? This road has been the only way in and out for generations." They shrugged. They didn't care. And the kicker, They laughed when I mentioned that legally, it was still a recorded easement. One of them even said, "Good luck affording a lawyer." That night, I sat on the porch with my wife, staring at the stars that had always given me peace. But peace was far from me. I felt small, boxed in, like my father's legacy was being locked away behind that fence. She put her hand on mine and said, "You've always told me the land doesn't give up easy, neither should you." And that's when something lit inside me. I wasn't going to sit by and watch people who never set foot in a barn tell me I didn't belong on my own land. So I came up with a plan. If they wanted to treat that road like it was theirs, fine. But I was going to remind them that every action has consequences. They blocked me out with a fence. I was going to turn their precious gate into something they couldn't ignore. A toll road. Not out of spite, but out of survival. Out of fairness. Out of the grit that had been in my blood since the day I learned to ride a horse. I didn't know yet just how much of a storm I was stirring, or how far this battle would go. All I knew was this: the fight for my ranch, my family, and my father's memory had begun. And I wasn't backing down. When you've been pushed into a corner, sometimes the only way forward is through. That fence wasn't just a barrier of steel. It was a challenge, a dare, and if there's one thing my father raised me to never back down from, it was injustice. So, a few days after staring at that padlocked gate, until my blood boiled, I started putting my plan in motion. Now, I'm not the kind of man who runs into battle without thinking. I knew if I just cut the lock, tore the fence down, or tried to sneak through at night, I'd end up in a lawsuit so fast my head would spin. They were waiting for me to slip up, to make me the bad guy. Here's the thing. I still had that easement in the county records. My lawyer confirmed it, an old but ironclad right of way that had been grandfathered in. Legally, I had every right to use that road. The HOA's shiny fence wasn't just rude, it was illegal. The problem, proving it in court would take months, maybe years, and every passing day without road access meant my ranch was choking. Deliveries couldn't come in, buyers couldn't reach me, and hauling hay meant a brutal detour through rocky back trails. I needed a solution now. So instead of fighting them head-on, I decided to play along. If they wanted to treat that road like it was theirs, fine. I'd treat it like it was a business. I went down to the county office, filled out paperwork, and with the help of a very amused clerk, registered myself as the operator of a private toll access. Sounds crazy, I know. But on paper, totally legal. The next morning, I rolled up with my son and a couple of buddies from town. We built a little wooden booth right by that shiny new fence. I painted a sign in bold black letters, PRIVDROY TAL REQUIRED FAR ACSS. Resident 10, visitors door 20 point. And then, cherry on top, I installed a box with a slot and a camera pointing right at it. The first car that came down the road that morning slowed to a stop. A woman in a luxury SUV rolled her window down, eyebrows arched so high they could have touched the roof. "What is this supposed to be?" she demanded. "Ma'am," I said calmly, "this is now a toll road. The HOA wanted control, so now everyone pays for upkeep. $10 for residents, 20 for visitors. Exact change, please." She spluttered, her face turning red, and drove off in a huff. But the camera caught it all. By lunchtime, half the neighborhood knew about my toll booth. Some refused to pay, turning around and fuming. Others, desperate to get home, begrudgingly shoved bills into the slot. By evening, I had collected close to $100. Not bad for day one. Of course, the HOA board wasn't laughing. They called me, left voicemails full of threats. They even sent a cease and desist letter. I pinned it right on the booth for everyone to see. Then came the meeting. Oh, I made sure to show up early, clean jeans, pressed shirt, hat in hand. The whole room buzzed with whispers when I walked in. The president, that same man in the polo shirt, slammed a gavel on the table. "This circus ends now. You can't charge our residents to use this road." I leaned back, calm as a Sunday morning. "Well, Funny thing. You built a fence across my easement. That's against the law. But instead of suing you, I figured I'd operate within the rules you seem to love so much. It's private property now, right? So it's a private toll road. Just running it like you'd run your HOA dues. Murmurs rippled through the room. Some folks chuckled. Others frowned, realizing I wasn't bluffing. The president turned red. This is extortion. No, sir, I replied evenly. It's called adaptation. You made it a gate. I made it a gate that pays for itself. Weeks went by, and the tension simmered. The toll booth stood tall, and I made enough cash from frustrated residents to cover repairs, fuel, and even buy my boy the new boots he'd been needing. Every dollar I collected, I logged carefully, keeping everything squeaky clean and above board. Then something surprising happened. Neighbors, those same folks who once complained about my truck rattling by, started stopping to talk. Some even dropped money in the box with a grin, saying, "Fair's fair." They saw the absurdity of the HOA's power games, and little by little, the tide shifted. One older man, a veteran who lived in the development, shook my hand one afternoon. "Son, I don't know why they've got such a stick up their backside, but you've got grit. Reminds me of the old days. Keep fighting." It gave me strength, knowing not everyone saw me as the enemy. Eventually, the HOA realized they'd painted themselves into a corner. Every time they tried to push me legally, I pushed back with documentation, videos, and toll records. Public opinion was turning against them. Nobody likes paying extra just to drive home. And guess who they blamed? Not me. The guy with the toll booth. They blamed the board that started it all with that fence. Finally, they folded. One Saturday morning, I woke to the sound of clanging metal. My boy and I hurried down the road, and there it was, a crew dismantling the gate. The same shiny steel posts that had blocked us in were being yanked out of the dirt, tossed aside like scrap. I stood there, arms crossed, and the HOA president wouldn't even meet my eyes. He muttered something about legal review, and walked off. When the last piece of that fence hit the ground, I felt a weight lift off my chest I didn't even know I'd been carrying. My boy looked up at me and asked, "Daddy, does this mean we won?" I knelt down, put a hand on his shoulder, and said, "We didn't just win, son. We proved you never let anyone take what's yours without a fight. Not when it's right. Not when it's fair. The toll booth." I left it standing for a while, not as a business, but as a reminder. A little wooden shack by the roadside, with that sign still nailed up. Folks would pass by and smile, shaking their heads at the story. It became part of the land, like another fence-post or oak tree. And me, I kept ranching. Kept raising my boy to know that the land is worth fighting for, that family is worth protecting, and that sometimes the smartest battles aren't fought with fists or fury, but with wit and grit. Looking back, I realized the fence was more than just a barrier. It was a test. A test of patience, resilience, faith. And, if there's one message I hope anyone takes from this story, it's this: when people try to fence you out of your own life, don't just tear the fence down, build something stronger, smarter, and lasting in its place. Because sometimes the very gate they use to keep you out becomes the gate you walk through to victory.